The grand wedding hall was a spectacle of gilded opulence, a testament to the wealth of Chief Natazie. Laughter, rich and self-assured, bubbled from the tables where the bride's family sat, their silks and jewels shimmering under the soft glow of countless electric bulbs disguised as golden lanterns. At the center of it all, Kachi, the groom, looked at his bride, Amara, his heart so full he felt it might burst. She was a vision in white, a delicate lace veil framing a face alight with happiness. For a moment, everything was perfect. Then, a sharp, carrying whisper sliced through the celebratory din. A needle of venom in a balloon of joy. "Look," the voice hissed, belonging to a slender, sharp-faced cousin of the bride, named Iphioma. The groom's mother finally arrived. It seemed she came straight from her cleaning duties. Did she mistake the wedding hall for a floor to be scrubbed? All eyes, as if pulled by a single string, turned to the entrance. There stood Mama Ebel, a small, still figure in a simple, faded blue dress, her hands, rough and callous from a lifetime of labor, clasped tightly in front of her. The dress was clearly her best, painstakingly pressed, but it was humble cotton against the sea of shimmering damask and imported lace. A wave of sneers and muffled, cruel giggles rippled through the bride's section of the hall. Kachi's brilliant smile vanished, replaced by a stiff mask of disbelief. His heart, so light moments before, turned into a heavy, cold stone in his chest. He saw his mother's shoulders curl inward, a familiar, heartbreaking gesture of shame, her eyes fixed on the intricate patterns of the marble floor as if she could disappear into them. The lively high-life music from the band seemed to falter and die, choked out by the weight of the mockery. The air grew thick and silent, and then, moving with a slow, deliberate gravity that commanded the attention of every soul in the room, Kachi pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. To truly understand the depth of the silence that fell in that hall, you must first know of our village, Nakwa, and the ancient river that cradles it. We do not live by an ordinary river. This is the great river of echoes, a wide, powerful flow of water the color of wet earth, whose voice is part of our daily lives. It was said by our ancestors, and we still believe it to be true, that every sound made on its banks, every laugh, every cry, every spoken word, is carried across its shimmering surface and returned to the shore as a clear, distinct echo. This was not mere sound bouncing off stone, we were taught. It was the spirit of the river itself, repeating a truth that needed to be heard, a lesson that needed to be learned. Mama Ebel, more than anyone, lived her life by this belief. When her son, Kachi, was just a small boy with eyes too big for his thin face, she would take him to the riverbank after her long, exhausting days. She would sit on a smooth, worn rock, and he would lean against her knees as she told him stories. "Words have wings, my son," she would say, her voice soft but firm as the riverbank clay. "They're like birds. Once you set them free from your mouth, you cannot call them back. They never truly disappear. They always fly back, in time, to the one who sent them." Young Kachi, watching the water swirl and eddy, would frown in thought. "Even the cruel words, Mama," he asked one evening, after older boys had taunted him. She nodded, a deep, timeless sadness in her eyes that a child should not have to see. "Especially the cruel ones, my heart, for they are heavy, and they fall fastest from the sky." The rhythm of Mama Ebel's life was set to the sound of scrubbing brushes and the slosh of water. Her days began in the dark, chilly hours before sunrise and ended long after the sun had surrendered to the moon. She moved through the spacious, cool homes of Nakwa's wealthy. Homes with polished wooden floors and furniture carved from dark mahogany. Her world was one of soap suds and the sharp, clean scent of bleach. Her hands, once smooth, grew rough and calloused, the nails short and practical. The women of these houses, with their soft hands adorned with gold and silver, often spoke as if she were not there, or as if her ears were not meant for their secrets. "There goes the river rat," one would say to another, sipping her tea while Mama Ebel polished the silver, still smelling of soap and other people's struggle. "It clings to her, that smell of poverty." Mama, Ebel never answered. She would simply bow her head, her focus on the smudge on the glass, the scuff on the floor, her prayers silent whispers carried on the steam from her wash bucket. Great river, she would plead, give me strength, not for my own pride, but for my boy. Let him see dignity in this labor. Let him never be ashamed. One afternoon, as she was cleaning the vast windows of Chief Nadizy's compound, she felt a pair of eyes on her. It was his daughter, Amara, a girl of about 10, standing in the doorway, not with a look of contempt, but with a quiet, intense curiosity. She saw not just a cleaner, but a woman of quiet grace and unspoken stories. Kachi grew like a strong sapling on the riverbank, nurtured by his mother's love and her unwavering principles. He was a bright boy, his mind a sharp knife that could cut through the most complicated lessons at the village school. But his heart, protected by his mother's wisdom, remained soft and open. The other children, the sons of merchants and prosperous craftsmen, often found him an easy target for their cruelty. "Kachi the cleaner's boy," they would chant as he walked home, his books tucked under his arm. "Does your mother bring the smell of other people's dirt home with her? Do you eat the dust from her skirts?" Instead of cowering or responding with his fists, Kachi would stop, turn, and stand tall, his gaze steady and unnerving. "It is better to be the son of an honest cleaner," he would declare, his voice clear and carrying, "than to be the child of a prideful man who has never dirted his hands with real work." This kind of wisdom, so profound and unexpected from one so young, did not go unnoticed. The village elders, their faces lined with the maps of long lives, would sit in the shade of the great Irako tree, watching the world go by. They saw Kachi pass each day. One of them, Elder Chukwu, stroked his long, white beard and murmured to the others, his voice like dry leaves. "This boy's tongue, it does not speak with a child's folly. It carries the river's own truth." Mark my words, the years flowed onward, as constant and changing as the river of echoes itself. The scrawny, bright-eyed boy became a man, his shoulders broad and his mind even broader. Kachi earned the respect of the village not through wealth, but through his character and his keen understanding of people and problems. At the annual harvest festival, the air thick with the smells of roasting corn and sweet, fried akara, the village green was alive with music and dancing. It was there, beneath a sky dusted with a million brilliant stars, that he found himself standing beside a grown Amara. She was radiant, adorned in a dress of deep indigo embroidered with silver thread, but a lonely, wistful shadow seemed to linger in the depths of her beautiful eyes. He smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile. "The festival is so full of joy," he said gently, "but you look as though you are searching for something the lights cannot show you." She laughed a little, surprised by his perception. "I was just thinking," she said, pointing to the lantern strung between the trees, "how all these lights look like captured stars, like someone gathered them from the sky and hung them here for us." Kachi then told her an old folktale his mother had told him on countless nights. "There is a flower," he began, his voice taking on the rhythm of a storyteller, "that blooms only in the deepest dark of night, its petals the color of liquid moonlight. It is called the humble heart. It refuses to grow in the rich, manicured gardens of the wealthy, choosing instead to push its way through cracked, dry earth, for it knows that true beauty is not given, but earned from within." Amara listened, utterly captivated, the noise of the festival fading away. Something warm and new, a seed of connection, stirred in her heart. But from across the crowded green, her father, Chief Nadizy, watched them, his face a cold, hard mask of disapproval. Chief Nadizy was a man whose pride was the foundation of his very being, as solid and imposing as the stone walls of his compound. That very night, after the festival, he summoned Amara to his large, wood-paneled study. The room smelled of old leather and expensive cigars. "I saw you," he said, his voice low and dangerous, like the growl of a leopard, "talking to that boy, that cleaner's son. That ends now. It ends tonight." Amara, her heart pounding, tried to protest. "But father, he is not just a cleaner's son. He is kind, and he is wise." He sees the world differently. The chief slammed his heavy fist on the desk, making the ink pot jump. Nonsense. A bird that mates with the ground cannot fly. We are eagles, child. We soar. We do not mix with rats who scurry in the dirt. His words were final, absolute. He forbade her from ever seeing or speaking to Kachi again. But the seed of love, once planted in fertile ground and watered by defiance, is a stubborn thing. It began to grow, its roots digging deep into Amara's heart. She started meeting Kachi in secret, in the hidden clearings by the river of echoes, where the only witnesses were the fireflies and the listening water. They shared stories, dreams, and quiet promises under the moon's gentle silver gaze. And on that first night of their secret meeting, as they whispered of a future together, the river's surface, usually a placid mirror for the stars, began to tremble and stir, as if disturbed by a deep, unseen current of consequence. The chief, with his network of eyes and ears, soon learned of the secret riverside meetings. His rage was a cold, terrifying thing. He summoned Kachi to his compound, not to the study, but to the open courtyard, surrounded by sycophants and hangers-on. He intended to humiliate the young man, to crush his spirit, and show him the unbreachable chasm between their stations. So, Nadazi boomed, his voice echoing off the walls. You think your borrowed wisdom makes you worthy of my daughter? You, who live in the shadow of a broom. What can you possibly offer her? The lingering scent of soap. His followers erupted in obsequious laughter. Kachi stood calmly in the center of the dusty courtyard, his back straight, his head held high. He was alone, but he did not look alone. I offer a heart that knows its own value. Chief Nadazi, he replied, his voice not loud, but carrying a core of steel. I offer hands that are clean from the dirt of dishonesty and stolen wealth. Can you offer her the same? The chief was momentarily speechless. This was not the cowering, apologetic boy he had expected. With each barbed insult thrown his way, Kachi answered not with the heat of anger, but with a cool, unshakable wisdom that seemed to highlight the chief's own bluster and insecurity. Nadazi felt a flicker of unwanted respect, which he quickly smothered beneath a fresh wave of arrogant fury. As Kachi was finally dismissed, walking away with a quiet dignity that was more powerful than any retort, an ancient, wrinkled woman who was always begging at the compound gate looked directly at the chief. Her eyes, milky with age, seemed to see right through him. The river watches pride. Great chief, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. It always has, and it never blinks. The seasons turned, and Mama Ebel worked harder than ever before. A persistent, racking cough settled in her chest, a rattling reminder of her weakening body, but she did not allow herself to rest. Kachi was now studying advanced figures and philosophy under the village scholars, and his books and materials cost more money than she had ever held in her life. She cleaned from the first rooster's crow until the last cricket's chirp, until her back screamed in protest and the skin on her hands was raw and cracked. All of it, every ache and pain, was for him. One twilight, as she knelt by the riverbank, washing a wealthy family's clothes, her body trembled with a fever she could not afford to acknowledge. The same old woman from the chief's gate, the seer, appeared as if from the mist rising off the water. Your sacrifice is seen, Mama Ebel, the seer said, her voice raspy yet filled with a profound kindness. She moved closer, her movements surprisingly fluid. It is measured not in coins, but in love, and the river keeps a ledger. She pressed a small, sealed gourd, smooth and dark from age, into the cleaner's work-worn hand. Listen to me. The day your heart is truly mocked, the day their laughter cuts the deepest, and you feel most alone, open this. The river's memory is inside. Confused, but feeling a strange, deep trust for the old woman, Mama Ebel nodded. She hid the gourd within the folds of her threadbare wrapper. She carried it with her every single day after, a strange, small weight, a mystery that became a part of her, a secret comfort in a world of harshness. Kachi's relentless hard work and his mother's profound sacrifices bore magnificent fruit. He returned to Nakwa not as a cleaner's son, but as a respected and promising young man, his name spoken with admiration by the elders. His first act, a testament to his courageous heart, was to go directly to Chief Nadazi's compound and formally, publicly, ask for Amara's hand in marriage. The chief was cornered. The entire village knew of Kachi's achievements and his sterling character. To refuse now would not only make him look a fool, but a cruel and unreasonable one. Grudgingly, his jaw so tight it looked like it might crack, he gave his stiff, joyless consent. The air in the room was thick with his displeasure. But as Kachi, his heart soaring, left the compound, the chief turned to his wife, his face a twisted mask of spite. "Let them marry," he whispered, a sly, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Let the entire village see the spectacle. Let them all see what true filth looks like when it has the audacity to stand beside gold. The contrast will be my final lesson to that arrogant boy." And so, the wedding preparations began, a whirlwind of activity. Tailors with bright fabrics, caterers with lists of delicacies, musicians practicing joyful songs. But beneath the bright surface of the silks and the joyful plans, the poison of pride was quietly, diligently weaving its dark, intricate threads, preparing for the feast. The wedding day dawned, clear and brilliant, the sun a perfect golden coin in a sky of pure, endless blue. Mama Ebel woke long before the first light touched the horizon. She washed carefully with the precious, scented soap she had saved for months to buy. She put on her very best dress, the one she had painstakingly stitched herself, the one she had saved for years to afford the simple, blue cotton fabric. It was plain, without a single piece of embroidery, but it was clean and pressed with a care that spoke of profound respect for the occasion. She arrived at the great hall early, her heart fluttering with a painful mix of joy and deep-seated anxiety. As she stood near the entrance, quietly admiring the beautiful floral arrangements and flowing white drapes, Amara's cousins arrived in a chattering, perfumed flock, draped in expensive, riotously colored asoebi lace. They took one look at her, a single, dismissive glance, and their laughter turned into mean, hushed whispers behind perfectly manicured hands. "Look at her," Iphiomas said, her voice deliberately loud enough to carry. Did she mistake this wedding for another cleaning job? Perhaps she thinks the white drapes are dust cloths. Another cousin, Neka, giggled, sound like breaking glass. "I heard she even brought her own bucket. Shall we spill some punch to make her feel at home?" Even Amara's mother, a woman who is usually kind, forced a thin, strained, embarrassed smile and pointedly looked away, studying the pattern on the ceiling. Mama Ebel felt their stares and their words like physical blows, each one a small, sharp cut. She said nothing, not a single word, but her hand slipped into the pocket of her dress, her fingers finding and closing around the cool, smooth, reassuring surface of the sealed gourd. The guests began to fill the hall, a colorful, noisy river of silk, damask, and self-importance. The air grew thick and warm with the mingled scents of roast goat, spicy jollof rice, and expensive imported perfumes. The band played a cheerful high-life tune, and for a moment, it seemed the celebration would overpower the undercurrent of malice. But then, a strange and unsettling thing happened. A cool wind, carrying the distinct, clean scent of wet earth and blooming river lilies, swept suddenly through the open windows. It was the river's whisper, a breath that felt ancient and out of place on such a warm, manufactured day. It brushed past Kachi as he shook hands with well-wishers, and he felt a sudden, deep unease settle in the pit of his stomach, a cold dread that had nothing to do with wedding jitters. He looked across the crowded room and found his mother's eyes. They were glistening, not with unshed tears of shame, but with a strange, knowing light, as if she could hear a secret melody in the wind that no one else could perceive. The musicians started the first formal toast, a joyous fanfare, but the strange river wind had cast a subtle, questioning silence over a portion of the crowd, a momentary hush that made the coming mockery feel even louder. The feast began in earnest, and with the free flow of fiery palm wine and expensive champagne, the mockery growing bolder, shedding its hushed pretense. An uncle of the bride, a man named Uche with a loud, blustering voice and eyes already glazed from drink, stumbled to his feet to make a toast. He raised his crystal glass high, a mocking, lopsided grin on his flushed face. "To the happy couple," he slurred, his voice booming across the hall. "To my beautiful niece, Amara, a rose among less delicate flowers." He paused for the expected chuckle. "And let us not forget the one who made it all possible, the true architect of this union. Shall we raise our glasses to the humble broom that raised such a surprisingly fine groom?" The hall, or at least the side belonging to the bride's family, erupted in a wave of cruel, roaring laughter. It was the final, unforgettable cut, delivered not in a whisper, but in a shout. Mama Ebel closed her eyes, her entire body trembling. Her hand in her pocket gripped the gourd so tightly she feared it might shatter in her grasp. Kachi watched the scene unfold, the love and joy in his heart warring with a rising, cold, and focused fury. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table, the wood digging into his palm. The laughter seemed to go on forever, echoing in the gilded hall. And then he could take no more. He rose from his seat, his chair scraping against the marble floor with a sound that screamed through the noise, silencing it instantly. All eyes turned to him. A thick, tense silence fell over the grand hall, so complete that the sound of a single dropped fork would have been like a thunderclap. Kachi walked slowly, each step measured and purposeful, to the small, raised stage where the musicians sat, their instruments now silent in their laps. He did not look at his mother's tormentors. He did not glare at the drunk uncle. Instead, his gaze was soft, settled entirely on Amara, who watched him with wide, worried, and confused eyes. He picked up the talking drum, not to play a rhythm, but to hold it, a symbol of his intention to speak, to command the attention of the entire gathering. "My friends, my family, honored guests," he began, his voice quiet, yet it carried to every corner of the vast room, amplified by the silence. "Thank you for coming to celebrate this day with Amara and myself. But before we continue with the festivities, I wish to share a story." He paused, letting the curiosity build, feeling the weight of their collective gaze. "It is not a story of romantic love, or of great wealth, or of political alliance. It is an old tale, a simple folk tale my mother told me when I was a boy, a story that has shaped the man I have become." He took a slow breath. "Once, a long time ago, there was a woman who dedicated her life to cleaning away the filth others refused to touch. She worked so hard, with such pure and selfless intent, that her hands became permanently stained white from the soap and lye. People pointed at her. They mocked her for these white, ugly hands, calling them ghost hands. They crossed the street to avoid her touch. Yet, when her time on earth ended and her soul arrived at the gates of heaven, the angels themselves were waiting. And do you know what they did? They each wore pristine white gloves in honor of her sacred, thankless work. The hall was utterly, profoundly still, every person captivated against their will by the power of the parable. Kachi's voice grew stronger, infused with a power that seemed to emanate not just from him, but from the very air, from the strange wind that still whispered at the windows. She was a woman who washed away the dirt others were too proud to see. He continued, his eyes now slowly, deliberately scanning the stunned, guilty faces of Amara's family. She cleaned the messes they pretended did not exist. She scrubbed away the grime of their daily lives so they could live in comfort, and in return, they gave her only their contempt. His voice began to tremble, not with weakness, but with a rising, righteous emotion. "And those who laugh at clean hands," he said, his words sharp and clear as shards of ice, "have never truly touched the sacred, fertile dirt of love and sacrifice. They have only ever held dust." As he spoke these final, damning words, a low, deep rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, a long, rolling growl that seemed to travel up the river valley. Outside the great hall, The perfect blue sky began to bruise with swift, heavy, purple clouds. The bright sunlight vanished, replaced by a grim, greenish twilight. Then a soft, insistent rain began to fall, pattering against the high glass dome of the roof and the windows, a gentle, rhythmic drumming that seemed to underscore his every syllable, to agree with his every sentiment. It was as though the river of echoes itself had drawn near, a vast, silent congregation gathered to listen. And in that moment, Mama Ebel, her heart so full of a lifetime of pain and love that it felt ready to break open, finally slipped the gourd from her pocket and, with a quiet, decisive snap, broke its fragile, dried mud seal. What happened next would be spoken of in Aqua for generations. A faint shimmer, like heat rising from sun-baked earth, drifted from the mouth of the open gourd. It carried the fresh, clean, life-giving scent of the river after a long drought, a smell of purity and renewal. Then, something impossible, something miraculous occurred. On the polished, gold-veined marble floor of the hall, images began to ripple and form, as if the stone had turned into a liquid mirror, reflecting not the present, but the past. The guests gasped, leaning back in their chairs, some stumbling to their feet in shock. There, for all to see, was a young Mama Ebel, her face gaunt with hunger, on her hands and knees scrubbing the floors of a grand house while a baby Kachi slept fitfully in a corner, swaddled in rags. The scene shifted. They saw her, years later, giving her only small piece of protein, a piece of dried fish to her growing son, telling him with a bright, false smile that she had already eaten her fill. They saw her being called River Rat by sneering women in fine clothes, saw her silent, helpless tears falling into her wash basin, mixing with the soapy water. Every sacrifice, every ignored insult, every moment of bone-deep weariness, every ounce of love poured into her son played out before them in a shimmering, unending, heartbreaking loop. A choked sob broke the silence. It came from Amara's mother, her hand covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking as tears of pure, unadulterated shame streamed down her face. The liquid, shimmering images on the floor shifted once more. Now they showed a younger, more virulent Chief Natazi, his face hard with arrogance, standing over a poor, stooped farmer, arrogantly refusing to pay a fair price for his yams. "Take what I offer or starve," the image of the chief sneered. The scene changed again, showing him laughing with his friends at a lavish party, raising a glass. "The river of wealth flows only to those who are already strong enough to dam it for themselves," he proclaimed to cheers. The sight of his own past, his own casual cruelty displayed so vividly for all his guests and rivals to see, was too much for his pride to bear. It broke him. With a strangled, animal-like cry, Chief Natazi fell to his knees, his fine, embroidered agbada pooling around him in the shallow water now covering the floor. He remembered the old seer's warning at his gate, the prophecy he had dismissed as the ramblings of a madwoman. "The river watches pride," he whispered, his voice cracking with terror and realization. Then, louder, he confessed to the entire hall, "It is true. I have been a blind man. I have despised the poor. I have looked down on those who served me. I thought their humility was a weakness, and my arrogance was strength." As he spoke his confession, a powerful, invisible force slammed the windows open wide, and the river's echo boomed through the hall, not as a whisper, but as a clear, thunderous, singular voice that vibrated in their very bones. Every word returns. The gentle, persuasive rain outside transformed in an instant into a torrential, furious downpour. It was a waterfall from the sky. Water, clear, cold, and purposeful, began to pour under the doors and stream through the open windows, flowing across the floor of the wedding hall in a sudden, swift current. Guests shrieked and scrambled onto their chairs and tables, their fine shoes and garments soaked, as the water swirled around their ankles, then their calves. But this was not a chaotic, destructive flood. It washed over the golden-laid marble floors, scrubbing them with an unseen brush until they shone with a bare, honest, unadorned gleam, stripping away the pretense. The most miraculous thing was the water's behavior around Mama Ebel. It seemed to actively avoid her. It circled her feet, not touching her, instead glowing with a soft, ethereal, blue-white light as if it were honoring her, creating a dry, sacred space around the woman they had all mocked. She stood perfectly calm and still in the center of the chaos, a quiet, unshakable island in the cleansing storm, her simple dress now seeming like royal robes. Kachi and Amara, their hands clasped tightly together, waded through the knee-deep, strangely warm water and came to kneel before her, their postures ones of supplication and respect. Amara was weeping, but these were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of release, of a painful, societal scales falling from her eyes, of a truth so fundamental it could not be denied. She looked at Mama Ebel, this strong, humble, magnificent woman she had been too timid, too conditioned to properly defend. Without a word, her movements slow and reverent, she reached up and carefully, deliberately, removed the heavy, jeweled crown from her own head, the symbol of her family's status and wealth. Then she placed it gently, firmly, into Mama Ebel's lap. Her voice, when she found it, was a soft, firm whisper meant for the family, but it carried in the hushed, rain-filled hall. "This crown," Amara said, her voice clear as a bell, "belongs to a queen of strength, of sacrifice, of true nobility. And from this day forward, I will learn what that word truly means. I will serve beside you. I will learn the weight of a broom and the lightness of a clean heart." The hall was silent, save for the relentless, purifying sound of the rain on the roof and the quiet, broken sobs of those whose hearts were being shattered and remade. From nowhere and everywhere, the old seer's voice echoed one more time through the space, sounding deeply, profoundly satisfied. "The river is satisfied." As suddenly as it had begun, the rain stopped. The unnatural wind died down. The water receded as quickly as it had come, draining away through the doors and windows, leaving the hall spotless, clean, and smelling faintly, beautifully, of river lilies and wet, clean earth. The guests, still standing on their chairs and tables, their fine clothes dripping and clinging to them, slowly, sheepishly, climbed down. They were drenched, humbled, and utterly changed. Then someone gasped, pointing a trembling finger. Mama Ebel's simple, wet cotton dress was changing. Where there was once faded, plain blue fabric, there was now a gown that shimmered with the light of the full moon on a calm river. It flowed around her like liquid silver and starlight, soft and luminous, more beautiful and elegant than any silk or lace in the room. It was a garment not of this world. Some of the villagers, rubbing their eyes, swore they saw faint, shimmering forms, the benevolent, ancestral spirits of the river, bowing behind her in a gesture of deep, abiding respect. The pride that had filled the hall was gone, washed away, replaced by a profound, humbled, and awed reverence that was thicker and more real than the previous arrogance had ever been. The next morning, the sun rose on a Nakwa that was physically the same, but spiritually reborn. The river of echoes, which had been muddy and turbulent the day before, now ran so clear, and still you could see every pebble, every flickering fish at its bottom. The villagers, gathering at the banks, whispered in awe, saying the river had been purified by the truth it had witnessed, that it had washed itself clean of the reflected pride it had been forced to carry for so long. Chief Nadazi and his entire family were seen that very day, not in their fine, embroidered igbatas and expensive lace, but in simple, white cotton tunics. They were not in their compound, but in the village square, serving food at the common pot with their own hands and helping to repair the leaky thatch roof of an elderly widow's hut. It was not a grand, showy gesture, but a quiet, sincere, and sustained act of repentance. As the village awoke to its new beginning, Mama Ebel walked through her small, clean home, a look of peaceful, final completion on her face. She was tidying, not for the future, but as a closing gesture. She was preparing to leave something behind, her work finally complete. She gathered Kachi and Amara in their new, modest home, a place that already felt filled with more genuine love than the chief's great compound ever had. She took their hands in hers, her own now seeming softer, younger, the calluses smoothed away. "My children," she said, her voice full of a love so vast it seemed to fill the room. "This union is now blessed by more than just tradition or a priest's words. It is sealed by truth. It is built on a foundation that cannot be shaken. Remember this day, always. May your home never forget the clean, honest smell of soap and hard work, for it is the sacred scent of humility, and humility is the key to every true blessing." She then walked with them, hand in hand, to the bank of the River of Echoes. The water was preternaturally calm. From a fold in her shimmering new garment, she produced the now empty gourd. She tilted it over the flowing water, and a single, glowing, silver drop fell from its lip. As it touched the river's surface, the water glowed with a soft blue, pulsating light for a long, breathtaking moment, and then grew still and perfectly, mirror-like clear. That night, as the village slept a deep, dreamless sleep of the redeemed, a strange and beautiful sound drifted over the thatched roofs and mud brick walls of Nakwa. It was a lullaby, the very one Mama Ebel used to sing to Kachi when he was a boy, a simple melody about the moon and the river being friends. But her physical voice was not the source. It was carried on the night wind, sung by a chorus of gentle, unseen spirits, their harmony more beautiful than any human sound. The melody wove through the quiet streets, soothing and peaceful, a balm on the soul of the village. Children stirred in their sleep, smiling, whispering Mama Ebel, as if her name was a magical, protective charm. Kachi, sleeping soundly beside his new wife, woke suddenly. His heart was calm, but a deep sense of finality, of a beautiful, perfect chapter closing, settled over him like a warm, heavy blanket. He knew, without knowing how he knew, that something precious was departing, that a great cycle was coming to an end. When the first pale light of dawn touched the village, painting the sky in soft hues of rose and gold, Kachi went to his mother's small, familiar hut to bring her a breakfast of fresh pap and akara. The door, usually latched from the inside, was unlocked. A faint sense of foreboding touched his heart. He pushed it open gently. Inside, her bed was neatly made, the thin blanket folded with precision. Her small wooden comb, which had always sat on the little table by her sleeping mat, was gone. The hut was spotless, as always, but it felt empty in a way that was more than just the absence of a person. It felt still, as if time itself had stopped inside. The only thing that remained, placed carefully and purposefully against the doorframe, was her old, worn cleaning broom, its bristles frayed from years of service, as if waiting for its next user, a silent testament to a life of labor. The air inside the hut held the faint, sweet, lingering scent of river lilies. As Kachi stood there, his heart aching with a gentle, accepting loss, the old seer appeared at the gate. She did not enter, but her voice was kind and certain. "Do not grieve, son of Ebel," she said softly. Her work here was done. It was done perfectly. The river called its most faithful daughter home, and she answered. Years flowed into years. The story of the wedding of the river became a legend, a foundational myth for Nakwa, told and retold by travelers who passed through and by parents to their children. It was a tale of how a cleaner's boundless, selfless love had finally washed away the stubborn, ancient stains of village's pride. Kachi and Amara lived by the profound lesson of that day for the rest of their lives. They prospered in their own right, but their home was always open to all, its wealth measured in kindness, not in coins. They taught their children and their children's children to honor every person, from the chief, who now ruled with a humble heart, to the lowliest street sweeper who kept their paths clean. They knew, in their bones, that dignity was not in the title of your work, but in the integrity and love with which you performed it. One evening, As the family sat on their veranda, their youngest child, a girl with her grandmother's same deep, knowing eyes, asked, "Mama, will the river ever echo like that again? Will it ever speak so clearly?" As the sun began to set, painting the sky in a glorious tapestry of fiery orange, deep purple, and soft pink, the family walked together to the bank of the River of Echoes. The air was perfectly still and quiet. The water was a sheet of glass, reflecting the dazzling sky. And then, just as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, it came, a soft, clear, unmistakable whisper that seemed not to come from the air, but to rise from the water itself, from the stones in the riverbed, from the very heart of the world. It was Kachi's voice from long ago, his wedding speech echoing back as the river's eternal, cyclical truth. Asterisk, those who mock kindness mock the gods themselves. Asterisk, the family did not startle. They bowed their heads, not in fear, but in a shared, peaceful awe, a recognition of a promise kept. The villagers who heard it, working in their fields or walking home, felt a warmth spread through their hearts, a permanent reminder of the price of pride and the everlasting power of a pure, humble spirit. And the moral of the tale was etched into every soul, passed down like the most precious heirloom. Droplet kindness, though mocked, never stays small. It returns multiplied, washing away the stains of pride.